Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Secret History of Brands, the dark and twisted beginnings of the brand names we know and love, by Matt Macnabb, narrated by Matt Godfrey. Introduction. A brand is often developed around a name, logo, distinct packaging, and/or a dedicated mascot. Brand name products are such a part of our daily life and identity that it is difficult to imagine a world where they don't exist. There was a time, not all that long ago, when we weren't defined by the type of car we drove, or the brand of clothing or shoes on our bodies. Today, our culture thrives on brands in every facet of our life. These brands have all emerged into the post-industrial revolution marketplace and have become an enduring part of our daily lives over the past century. You might think of Bayer when you have a headache, Coca-Cola when you want a drink, and perhaps Ford when you're car shopping. These brands are taken for granted today, but they all started somewhere, and for many of the brands you know and love, their roots are firmly planted in dark, twisted, and sometimes violent origins. These aren't the stories that you'll read on the carefully crafted and orchestrated modern corporate histories of companies like Chanel or Adidas. These are the true stories of the brands you know, and the often very flawed individuals who created them. The landscape of both life and industry were very different prior to the events of the Industrial Revolution. The inception of brand names and corporations is relatively new. Before the development of mass manufacturing and industrialization, one had to rely on self-production or regionally produced products. Society, in both America and Europe, was comprised primarily of rural and agrarian culture. There were some cities, like London, that had grown and expanded as a capital city, but most of the towns and villages were self-sustaining. If you lived in a village, you would have your own on-site bakers, butchers, and blacksmiths, and you would often have to hunt for, or grow, most of your own food. If you lived in a rural setting and wanted clothing, food, or other goods, there were no stores to visit. If you were lucky, you had in-demand goods to barter and trade for other goods or services, but this process was spotty and largely unorganized. The more common occurrence was malnourishment and even starvation when things got difficult. There were no food banks or charities. If there was a bad crop or other pressingly negative issues in your region, any neighbors you had were likely suffering to a similar degree. This way of living carried over to the Americas in the 17th century, when the 13 colonies that would eventually become the United States were settled. The colonies would self-govern, even though there was still the British monarchy to answer to back at home across the ocean. The local landowners would vote for a provincial government and governor to oversee the goings-on there. When you came to the New World, it was literally starting over. There were no buildings and no cities or roads. There was only wilderness and the Native Americans who already resided there. This way of life would soon change, as the Industrial Revolution began to take shape in England. There were certain factors that were necessary for one central area to be the focal point of the coming industrialization. The demands of the 18th and 19th century included vital and bountiful naturally occurring deposits of commodities like coal and iron ore. Other materials were needed, but if a country had a vast colonization system in place around the world, then various raw materials could be easily mined and imported. The best option in the world at the time, and that was Britain. It was the natural birthplace of big industry. In 18th century Britain, the textile and iron industries were transformed in a major way. Cottage industry used to be the cornerstone of the textile market. In order to get the best version of mass production in those days, the work would be distributed to workers to complete in their homes on their own time. This disorganized and unsupervised way of doing things left the industry plagued with overdue deadlines and inconsistent returns. Still, it was the best and most efficient way of doing things until the age of mechanization was born. It was in 1764 that weaver and inventor James Hargreaves developed one of the first methods of spinning spools of yarn, called the spinning jenny.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?